By more than 5-1, voters believe President Biden's policies will lead more migrants to try crossing the border compared with President Trump's policies. Our CBS News poll out this morning shows the former president with a 4-point edge over the current president.
Just 13% of Americans say they've gotten better financially since the president took office.
Push that forward and ask, well, whose policies might make prices go down? And there's a lot of Republicans who think that prices will go down if Donald Trump gets elected. But what's troubling for Joe Biden is that you still get him associated with price increases, because a lot of people think that prices would continue to go up under his policies.
37% approve and now 60% disapprove.
And we should say that is the lowest approval rating since former President George W. Bush's second term.
This Justice Department is deeply committed to racial justice and racial equity, and ensuring that we have environmental justice for vulnerable communities is a part of that work.
What I can say is, look, you're going to hear the president on Thursday speak about the State of the Union, obviously, speak to Congress, but also millions of Americans who are going to be watching. This is a president that has done more in his 3 years as president than most presidents have done in their 2 terms.
What is wrong here? What is the disconnect that people think that Joe Biden is presiding over the worst economy in a decade?
Our economy is a comeback. Our economy is a comeback story, and we've got to start telling that story, Michael. And Democrats, I think, when it comes to messaging, we're at our worst when we try and speak to the head, and we try and get all cerebral, and we talk about the numbers and unemployment numbers and GDP growth. That doesn't mean anything.
And it's really important that we understand that this is going to be a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And we have to lift up that Joe Biden is working on the real issues that the American people care about. He is working towards peace. And Donald Trump is openly xenophobic, openly anti-Muslim, and would do nothing to actually address the real issues that the American people care about.
The right to vote is still under attack. And that is why the Justice Department is fighting back. That is why one of the first things I did when I came into office was to double the size of the voting section of the Civil Rights Division. That is why we are challenging efforts by states and jurisdictions to implement discriminatory, burdensome, and unnecessary restrictions on access to the ballot, including those related to mail-in voting, the use of drop boxes, and voter ID requirements. That is why we are working to block the adoption of discriminatory redistricting plans that dilute the vote of black voters and other voters of color.
Listen, I think the president is an incredibly compelling figure, and I would hope that the White House will send him out all over the country to just be who he is, right? He comes across as Scranton Joe Biden when he is engaging with voters, and I hope he does more of that. I think he will.
A 22-year-old nursing student, I know you've been following this, Laken Riley in the state of Georgia was murdered allegedly by an undocumented Venezuelan migrant. The suspect had been detained by Border Patrol upon crossing, released with temporary permission to stay in the country. He then went on allegedly to commit crimes twice, once in New York for driving a scooter without a license and once in connection with a shoplifting case in Georgia. Did those states and their law enforcement communicate to the federal government that this had happened? Should this man have been deported?
A few thoughts. First, Margaret, first and foremost, an absolute tragedy, and our hearts break for and our prayers are with the family, number one. Number two, and importantly, as a prosecutor, having prosecuted violent crime and other crimes for 12 years, one individual is responsible for the murder, and that is the murderer. And we work very closely with state and local law enforcement to ensure that individuals who pose a threat to public safety are indeed our highest priority for detention and removal.
But are you saying there that the federal government had been informed about this individual and the alleged crimes he had committed in those states? Because he could have been deported if that was the case. Was there a breakdown in the system?
So, Margaret, there are a number of cities around the country that have varying degrees of cooperation with the immigration authorities. We firmly believe that
New York did not?
We firmly believe that if a city is aware of an individual who poses a threat to public safety, then we would request that they provide us with that information so that we can ensure that that individual is detained if the facts so warrant.
As the whole sanctuary city movement, did it go too far? Are we seeing a rollback of that? Should there be a rollback of that?
Well, we treat immigrants compassionately in Connecticut as well. And listen, I think that speaks to the best of this country. Ultimately, this solution has to be on the border and in the countries that people are fleeing. I don't think it's in the best interest of this country to push immigrants into the shadows once they are here.
Is there anything he can do without Congress to act now?
Margaret, we as an administration have taken executive actions. Those executive actions are being litigated. We do need Congress to act. For more than 3 decades, our system has been broken.
As president, Trump severely restricted asylum and required migrants to await their court hearings in Mexico. When President Biden took office, he reversed those policies, but is now considering employing an executive power used by Trump to suspend asylum.
A record 8.6 million migrants have crossed into the U.S. since President Biden took office. The Border Patrol Union telling us Mr. Biden should not have reversed Trump border policies.
They were very effective for us as Border Patrol agents in securing the border.
An NBC News poll shows 57% of Americans say Mr. Trump can best secure the border. Just 22% say Mr. Biden will.
Do you believe that there should or will be an impeachment trial, or will you vote to dismiss the case outright?
Dana, we're looking at all the options, and I'll just tell you, I think what the House did was a political stunt. It's never been done in history. There certainly is no evidence of a high crime or misdemeanor in any respect in the performance of Secretary Mayorkas, but we're considering all our options.
What do you want to happen? Would you like to dismiss it?
I'd like to see us get on with the business of the Senate.
Why did it take so long for the president to address this crisis at the border in terms of the flow of migrants?
Well, I don't know that that's fair. In the first week that the president was in office, he sent to Congress a comprehensive immigration and border reform bill.
But wait a minute. That bill was to provide a path to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented citizens, residents here in the country. It was not a border security bill. It was an immigration bill.
No, it was also an asylum reform bill, right? And reforming the asylum system.
It didn't tighten the asylum rules the way yours did, did it?
Changes the calculus for people coming into the country. And the president instituted a very tough new regulation that does stop people at the border, does change the asylum calculation.
Listen, I sympathize with every state that is receiving asylum seekers and even undocumented immigrants who can't manage those. And I suppose that is what Governor Abbott is trying to tell everybody by shipping folks across the country. But what we've seen is that the inhumane way in which he's done it. First of all, it's been completely political. Remember that Joe Biden is handling the complexities of the world. You saw that for the last week on every issue in the Middle East. I mean, the man is doing yeoman work, and you got a guy on the other side who, frankly, barely knows the difference between one animal and another.
Is it the policy of the Biden administration to allow as many migrants to come across the border in order to change the political dynamics, the electoral dynamics of America?
Of course not. And the facts indicate that that is absolutely false. Since May of this year, of last year, we have removed or returned more individuals than in any year since 2015, and we haven't even run 12 months. We, as a country and as a world, have to be ready for the increasing effects of extreme weather caused by climate change. It's a remarkable phenomenon, and it will manifest itself in the days to come, and we have to prepare for it.
They do this because they try to make a point that there is a discussion in the zeitgeist. There is a reason that they did a whole thing about Joe Biden's age. Do you want to have a real statement about it, about what you witnessed?
They should spend a bit of time with Joe Biden like I have done. Let me share something with you. I prepare a lot for meetings with him and engagements with him because he's remarkably detail-oriented, probing, and operationally focused.
Take a listen.
The fact of the matter is there are laws on the books passed by Congress of the United States right now that authorize the executive branch to deny illegal entry. The president does not need new laws. The president needs a backbone to make sure that he enforces the immigration laws that are already on the books.
Couldn't be more wrong. Couldn't be more wrong. And as a matter of fact, former President Trump tried to close the border, and it was enjoined in the courts and never saw the light of day. This coming from an individual who is purposefully refusing to coordinate, communicate, collaborate with other officials, and trying to wreak havoc in other cities and states across the country.
And let me tell you, it is impossible to deport every undocumented person in this country. There simply are not the resources, nor is it advantageous to us. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the reports, Jim, that it has been immigrant labor, the immigrant workforce, that has actually propped up our economy.
I know with a lot of turmoil and a lot of controversy in the world, we need to make sure people understand the good that is coming their way because of the president's leadership.
First, the House Foreign Affairs Committee is threatening to hold Secretary Blinken in contempt if the State Department does not hand over material concerning the Afghanistan after action reports, specifically some internal notes. What is the White House's response to that contempt threat? And then did the White House ever direct the State Department to hold up on releasing those documents?
I'm going to refer you to the State Department on that.
So the committee says that in their interactions with the State Department referred them to a White House lawyer. So can you tell us anything about that?
Talk to the State Department about that.
Well, look, as far as executive action, I've been very clear about that from here, from this podium, when you all have asked me. We always obviously look at every scenario, every option. We evaluate all of those things. But we do believe, which is why the president went to the border, to Brownsville, Texas yesterday, that the way to move forward, the bottom line is we need to take action and move forward with the bipartisan agreement that came out of the Senate. That is the way that we believe we can actually deal with what the challenges at the border. We can deal with the broken immigration system. There is no executive action that would be able to do what this negotiation came out in a bipartisan way.
Immigration has definitely risen since Biden took office, even without legislation being passed. It's much higher now than it was 5 years ago. So why is that if it's not because of Biden's executive actions that he took when he got into office?
I mean, that's why it's so important to get this bipartisan deal that came out of the Senate done. We understand that there's challenges at the border. We understand that the immigration system is broken. It's been broken for decades. It was broken under the last administration. We want to get this done. But I will say since May of last year, DHS has removed or returned more than 565,000 individuals, and the vast majority of whom crossed the southern border. So, 565,000 removals and return is more than every full fiscal year since 2013. So that has been happening. DHS has been doing everything that it can to get that done. But we need to do more, which is why the president worked with the Senate in a bipartisan way. We gotta see that bipartisan border deal move forward.
Is the administration coming around to the idea that physical border barriers work?
Can you say more? Where's this? What do you mean? Where's this coming from?
Well, it's been 6 weeks since you guys won a Supreme Court case that would have allowed you to remove razor wire at the Texas border that you guys argued there's an emergency, immediate need to take down, but it's still up. So DHS hasn't touched it. Why is it still up?
I mean, you have to speak to the Department of DHS, obviously. I just don't have anything for you on that. We were very clear about what we thought about those wires. Obviously, DOJ took action. I just don't have anything on timeline of those coming down. I'm sure they'll have more for you on that. They showed the American people that to them, partisan politics is more important than our border security. When Governor Abbott chooses to use migrants as political pawns and leave them by the side of the road in the dead of winter, he shows Republicans are more interested in politics than solutions.
The president said at the border yesterday that it's long past time to act. Heard all of your previous answers on executive orders, but The president took 94 or so executive actions in his first 100 days that largely loosened immigration policy. One of those was narrowing who ICE could remove. And the administration, as of yesterday, I believe, is now calling on sanctuary cities to cooperate with ICE. So why doesn't the president act like he said it's time to do and start undoing some of those policies that he put in place right when he got into office?
So I think a couple of things. Since day one, the president took action. He did. He put forth a comprehensive immigration policy, and he did that because he understood what was happening, right? He understood that the immigration system was broken. He understood that we needed to take action, and he did. 3 years. And during those 3 years, Republicans got in the way. Any resources, any additional resources that we asked for, they voted down. They didn't want to move forward with it. With support.
He's shaming people for not acting. He's also not acting.
I'm so sorry. That is so false. He has taken action. He has taken action. Republicans rejected it because of the last president. That is not what is going on here. It isn't. I mean, they told on themselves. Republicans told on themselves and said that the former president told them to not move forward with the bipartisan border patrol deal. So they told on themselves.
Executive action you can take.
We're saying that the best way to move forward is legislation. That's with any issue. The best way to move forward is legislation. Put that into law. And we have a bipartisan agreement that would do that. By the way, the bipartisan agreement, that border deal, has provisions in there that these House Republicans want. These congressional Republicans have been asking for years. So what's the problem? What's the problem? Is it politics or is it the American people? That's for them to answer. Look, you know this president. If you watch this president very closely, the last 3 years, if you watched him his entire career, he believes in going across the aisle and working in a bipartisan way.
The idea there's no such thing as climate change, I love that, man. I love some of my Neanderthal friends who still think there's no climate change.
What the president wants to do, and what you will hear during the State of the Union, is that he'll lay out his historic achievements over the past 3 years and what he's been able to do on behalf of the American people. You'll hear him talk about how he is on the side of the American people. That's important. The president has done more in 3 years in this administration than most president has done in 2 terms. I mean, that is what we've seen.
I'm going,